Welcome to Ashley On, your one-stop podcast where we talk about health and wellness, spirituality, and all things new. Stick around as we delve deep into innovations to support a better world.
Hello and welcome to the show. Today we're with Del Jolly, the founder of Unlimited Sciences, which is an amazing nonprofit group here in Colorado that's doing a lot of research and sponsoring research with Johns Hopkins University and others into psilocybin and the usage and potential that holds for health benefits. Here in Colorado, we hear a lot about the health benefits. There's a decriminalization effort going on in Denver, and things are changing very rapidly, but people are using this PTSD, depression, end-of-life anxiety, eating disorders, quitting smoking, migraine headaches, Lyme disease. These are just some of the things that folks are finding. They've suffered, some of these things for their whole lives, right? And they experience one dosage of a psilocybin mushroom experience and set the intention to change their behavior, and everything changes. It's a miracle, right? And Del is behind all of that and trying to bring research rigor to helping explain this and gain, public credibility behind the alternative treatments that are represented by mushrooms. And here's to Johns Hopkins University for helping out with that and getting behind this effort as well. So hope you really enjoy the show today. It's very informative. We'll probably do another episode with Del sometime down the road, but enjoy this one first. And it's Del Jolly from Unlimited Sciences. Have a great day.
Hey guys, as always, this episode is brought to you by Packed with Life Tea. I always talk about how much I love iced tea, and Packed with Life tastes fantastic. And I don't add any sweetener or anything like that. Just great tasting iced tea, packed with organic adaptogens, including the 4 key mushrooms: lion's mane, chaga, cordyceps, and reishi. Of course, it tastes great as hot tea as well, if that's your thing. And some people like to add a little bit of honey. But either way, no matter how you like your tea, you're going to love this tea, and it will boost your immune system, brain, lungs, and gut. That's why it's packed with life. So get yours today at packedwithlife.com. Have a great day.
Hey, Del.
Hey, Ashley. How are you, man?
Good to see you again. How are things?
Good to see you. Good. Thanks for chatting with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for all the stuff you're doing, and thanks for taking time to join me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man.
So tell us about, give us the high level on Unlimited Sciences, and then we can go deeper into that. But tell our audience what you're up to there.
Yeah, well, so as you know, and as you and I met is through Charlotte's Web, and I was very familiar and came to Charlotte's Web through the Realm of Caring, which is a cannabis nonprofit, and that was started by Paige Figge and Heather Jackson, whose children were having pediatric epilepsy episodes, and cannabis was the only thing that helped. And they, championed that cause to start informing other families how to use cannabis for that particular ailment, and it just kind of grew. As after I started working for Charlotte's Web and put in time there and learned more about all plant medicines, I was also part of the Decrim Denver movement, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall as far as there's going to be some sort of story that's going to break, and people are going to want to know how to use psilocybin in a meaningful way, and to results, and they're going to not have any real resources to make those decisions on how to do it. And so with the background from the Realm of Caring and their data collection with Johns Hopkins University on cannabis, reached out to Heather Jackson, and we started Unlimited Sciences to collect data on how people use psilocybin in the quote unquote real world. And so we've launched our prospective observational research registry that is currently we have over 6,800 people who've enrolled. It's a series of surveys that kind of ask them about their experience and what that looks like. And it's longitudinal, meaning that it's over the course of about long-term 3 to 5 months, depending on when they'll participate in responding. But it's, a couple weeks before your intended use, the day of before you use, the day after, 2 weeks after, and then I think the last is a 3-month follow-up. So that's what Unlimited Science is up to, working with Johns Hopkins to better understand real world use. So that's the nitty gritty first,
Wow.
30K view.
You have 6,800 people signed up.
6,800 people have signed up. That's not how many have completed. I think we're close to 1,000 going through all 5 surveys. There's always fall off, which is, it's tough. These validated measures that are acceptable by the academic community aren't necessarily, user friendly, if you will. So we get fall off to be expected, but I think by the end of it, we in this study, this coming March, we've been doing it since August of 2020. We launched. It's been well over a year now. We're going to end it here in March, but by the time we're done with it, we already have the largest data set on how people use psilocybin in the real world.
Yeah. So tell our audience, what do people use psilocybin for? What are they trying to achieve as a result of being a part of your study and by the use?
Yeah, well, we hear all these, a lot of studies that get quoted are coming out of Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins has been kind of at this the longest. They even started back in 2000, before this was even in the news as prominent as it is now. And one of the most quoted studies is always a smoking cessation study that Dr. Matt Johnson, who's part of our study, put together. And this is a very, very interesting study showing a collective of people who use psilocybin to quit smoking. And some of those high level stats are, these are people who smoked an average of 32 years, 19 cigarettes a day, and then they quit cold turkey upwards to like 9 months after their deal to not smoking ever again for some of them. So, and that's like I think 76% success rate or whatnot. So that's just one story. That's smoking cessation. There are things that people are using it for, like cluster headaches. There's an organization called Cluster Busters, and this is a collective of people who are trying to better understand psilocybin for migraine headaches or cluster headaches. Obviously, PTSD is a very big category. End of life anxiety is where we're seeing a lot of the progress in Canada to get legislation passed there, so people who are at end of life are able to utilize psilocybin as a resource to help calm those fears. I mean, the possibilities truly seem to be endless about what these things can potentially help with. Eating disorders. That's another one that they're just starting to kick off a lot of studies towards. Lyme's disease, which is a neurological disease. They're going to start looking into that a bit more. So that's why it's so important that the work that we do validates this as a medicine and can show a lot of people, hey, that we're running out of a lot of options in a lot of areas, but the human mind and its capability, I think, is the last frontier. And psilocybin is, the covered wagon that's going to get us through uncharted territory.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I appreciate you sharing all that. Gives a lot of hope to a lot of people. I think I know that, you and I have a relationship with someone I had referred to you, that was struggling with depression. And I know you went out of your way to try to help that person and their family. And I really appreciate that very much. I mean, it was something, obviously you didn't have to get personally involved, and you did. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. But that's another thing that I wanted to share with the audience as well, is that there's some amazing results that you're seeing with, severe depression, right? Del, have you seen anything like that?
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean, just how I glossed over that. That's probably one of the biggest things that we're dealing with, and one of the biggest categories that people are utilizing it for, and where you see organizations like MAPS, um, Multiple Disciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. They're definitely the largest and longest standing nonprofit in the psychedelic space. They're very focused on MDMA, or what used to be known as ecstasy, the club drug, but it's actually incredibly effective when we talk about set and setting and how you're intentionally using it. When you're doing it in a therapeutic use, it's very, very different. People may recall psilocybin. Oh yeah, I did that once. It was really weird. I didn't like it. Well, you probably did it at a party, right? As opposed to like intentionally going in. But so the organization at MAPS is getting breakthrough status from the FDA because of treatment-resistant depression. MDMA is proving to be something that helps with treatment-resistant depression, and psilocybin is the same thing. Psilocybin is getting those fast-tracked FDA approvals due to its ability to treat treatment-resistant depression, which is basically where none of these other medications are really working at all for an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. You now to treat these conditions or whatever it is that we may be trying to get out of the psilocybin usage, are you talking about in your study a single time use, or are you talking about microdosing through the process, or both, or how are you guys looking at it?
Yeah, we're looking at larger single use examples. Microdosing is something that a lot of people are obviously chatting about, finding some success in. Jury's still out on that. There's some interesting studies kind of showing, well, I don't know if it's as effective as people say it is, but I personally know a lot of people utilize it and say it undoubtedly is something that helps them. Our study in particular is for what you'd call macro dosing, right? Where you're taking over a gram or more. We're finding that the majority, the typical size, I think, of the dosing that we're seeing that people are stating they're using is around like 3.7 grams. These are higher doses that would, incapacitate you, and
Right.
make you non-functional on a sobriety level. So that's what we're looking at, and that those types of experiences with heavier doses tend to lend the healing attributes when we're talking about things like cluster headaches or depression or end of life anxiety. It's these larger doses that people are taking to mitigate those difficulties they're having with various ailments. So that's what our study is kind of focused on. I believe that that's where this will head for big change. I think that it's going to be larger doses that are what's being sought after.
Yeah. So given that it is a larger dose, are you providing supervision resources for these folks, or are you counting on people to kind of understand they need to isolate and take precautions? You give them any advice, or how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, not at all. That's no advice at all. This is on your own free will. Obviously, psilocybin, again, being part of the Decrim Denver team, it's important for me to. I'm working quite regularly on decriminalization of these plant medicines, entheogens, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and I'm part of the Decrim Nature Boulder Steering Committee because Boulder's trying to decriminalize these plants. That's important to me, but at the end of the day, all of this stuff is illegal. There is not a single state where this is legal, and all the companies that are trying to start selling psilocybin microdosing, they're setting up for the DEA to smash them, and people are going to go to jail. That stuff needs to slow down for sure, because it's going to put a very, very bad taste in the DEA's mouth. And what they're going to do is they're going to drop the hammer on real progress that so many people have been working towards. So Our study does not recommend the use or any sort of insight. This is probably for folks who kind of understand what they're going to do, or maybe a lot of them are first time users, surprisingly. And I think that's because they're just hearing more and more about it.
And
that's
reached
really
the end of their rope, probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're there and they got to
try
try
anything
something
at this point, right?
Right. And so all that being said, where we don't provide advice, and this is observational research, just like, heroin is illegal, but there's tons of studies on how people are utilizing heroin and using heroin. And not to collect that is absolutely foolish, right? Because it's happening whether it's legal or not. Same with psilocybin. The difference is this type of data, what we would be able to do and what our plans to do with Unlimited Sciences in the future is to have this type of data and give it back to the community in the ways of, they call into our call center and they say, hey, I saw this story on CNN of, maybe it was a veteran who utilized psilocybin for their PTSD or depression, or I saw someone utilize it for their headaches. We can reference this data and say, hey, in our study with Johns Hopkins, we have, 14 people who fit your exact age, weight profile, if you will. And this is what the people who had the best quality outcomes did. Maybe it's not the 3.75 grams. Maybe it was only 1.5. Maybe it was always with the trained facilitator, individual therapist. Maybe it was in a group setting. Maybe it was at a rock concert at Red Rocks. We don't know what's going on. That's what we're trying to collect. That's why it's important to provide for people to enroll and to provide their insights on this, because if we can have that data to give back to people, it's a harm reduction effort, where we want people to have success, not have horror stories, so the media could point to it and say, look, here's a horror story. This is really, really bad news. Psilocybin is the safest, statistically the safest drug in the world that we know of right now, and alcohol is the most dangerous. So very interesting dynamic when we talk about no medical benefit, highly addictive. Those are the categories to fit you in a Schedule 1 narcotic, which psilocybin is. And I think most people who use psilocybin will say it is not highly addictive. They are not super excited to use it frequently. And there absolutely are medical benefits.
Yeah, it's if anybody, it's funny that a lot of these folks create these laws and such, and it's I'm convinced they have no idea, no experience with what they're doing, because if you've ever taken psilocybin, you understand, there can be some fun associated with it in certain situations, but that's not at all what the experience is generally best suited for. It's generally best suited for communal, spiritual self-reflection and bonding with a small group of people, right? It's not a party drug, if you will, at all, by any means.
Right. Well, even on the Boulder City Council folks that we're trying to talk to explain the benefits and the need for decriminalization, the genuine need for it. This isn't even hey, we just want to, not be bothered. This is like, after the pandemic, it's more necessary than ever. But, the concerns there are psilocybin dabs. This isn't something that exists. You don't dab psilocybin, and it's kind of like, man, these are the people making the laws around these things. It's concerning, the lack of understanding. And guess what? It's okay too. It's not their fault, right? I was against marijuana 8 years ago. Marijuana is the devil's.
No, I remember us talking about that, right? You were a convert.
Yeah. I mean, and all the while having no problem drinking my ass off, right? That's okay. That's culturally acceptable. Weeds for losers. while I'm, falling downstairs or whatever it is, right? I mean, it's just kind of like a bro culture that I don't blame people who don't understand this. It's really not their
They
fault.
don't.
We've spent a ton of time and money to give them a bullshit narrative, and I fed into it. But there comes a time when you hear a podcast like this where it's like, okay, what are these people talking about? Is this legit? There comes a time where you have to educate yourself, because we've all been fed a bunch of lies, so but there's enough resources out there to take it upon yourself to educate yourself. But the proof is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's, invariably we have to have the conversation of comparing things like this to alcohol, because this is what the media and everybody kind of creates, that sort of conversation. And the reality is, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this topic, but the reality is these things that we're talking about generally that are in the crosshairs of our government are the things that help us live more peacefully and more healthy, longer lives. And that does not seem to be in the government's agenda. And I'll leave it at that. Right.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned a couple things earlier about Johns Hopkins, and I give those guys a lot of credit for stepping up. I know they did a lot of work with us at Charlotte's Web and in the cannabis community early on. And now they're taking a lead here with psilocybin. Are they, they're overseeing this study, I guess, to bring the scientific method to it, or what are they able to contribute? How are they able to be involved given the legalities?
Yeah, with this study, we're Dr. Albert Garcia Romeo is our principal investigator. He's there with Roland Griffiths and Matt Johnson, who are also part of the study. Obviously, they lend their academic eye, the validated measures that we are utilizing to better understand the range of things that psilocybin affects. The Johns Hopkins IRB, their institutional review board, is who this study is passed through, which is incredibly rigorous. And what that means, and what that is stating to the listeners, that when we put together this study, it's got to meet a level of standard that is the academic community and publications will vouch for.
Accept,
and
right?
Yeah, and we're not leading our folks who are enrolling to say one thing or another. And we will publish all the bad things that we find about psilocybin. It's very, very important. If we find out, like, hey, I don't know, post 4 grams, things go downhill really, really fast. We want to open source this data so people can access it. We're seeing net positive, obviously, but Johns Hopkins definitely adds that level of professionalism that, you see a bunch of studies that are kicked out that are surveys like ours, but there's no IRB that's really,
Right.
Mitigating the risks of taking it.
Yeah. Now I know, obviously this gets even trickier given the laws and such, but when we were collaborating at Charlotte's Web, we were talking, a lot of this was involved with Harvard and Dr. Stacy Gruber, and they were doing a lot of things with brain research. Are you able to pull in any of that type of research into this to kind of see what's going on with the brain and the changes that are happening?
So, what we're doing and why this information is so incredibly important is while we're not doing brain imaging on this, because guess what? That costs millions of dollars if you're going to run a study to do that. Yeah. What our study does, and why Dr. Roland Griffiths seemingly partnered with us and chose to work with us, they're the best in the world, period. They don't just team up with anybody unless you've got a pretty bright idea. And the idea, what we can do with this type of data is we can inform clinical studies in the future. When Johns Hopkins raises X amount of dollars to study psilocybin, I think they recently raised like 17 million from Tim Ferriss and a collective of people. Let's face it, that's nothing. That's nothing in the world of these clinical studies. So if you could take prospective observational research like our study, which is fairly inexpensive to set forth, pull the data from there, find the signals in the noise, and say, guess what? A lot of people are utilizing psilocybin for TBIs or for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE or whatnot. In our study, we have validated measures that are related to traumatic brain injury. Okay, so if people start answering traumatic brain injury questions, we have skip logic in the study to start feeding them more questions that are related to that. We'll be able to take this study when we're done and say, guess what, Johns Hopkins, of the 6,800 people, half of them said they're utilizing it to, mitigate athlete's foot or whatever, right? Like you don't know what they're going to say, but you could find enough signals in the noise through a study like this to then inform clinical studies that cost millions of dollars. And it's a much safer bet. It's a much safer bet to say, let's put forth the several $1 million it's going to take to do the brain imaging for TBI and psilocybin study, because we have enough noise that tells us it's probably going to lead to something interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing that this is has come this far, right? And it's a lot of it's due to people like you and Heather and your teams that you put together and pushing the stuff forward. So congratulations on that. You know what I mean? Thank you for on behalf of society for doing this. Because it's certainly, like, I'm sure, like pushing rope uphill in a lot of situations. But it's real, right? I mean, this is real stuff. And, I want our listeners to understand, like, the results for these things that we're talking about: cluster headaches, PTSD, end of life anxiety, quitting smoking, depression, eating disorders. These results are snap of a finger results that happen after generally one of these sessions. Is that right, Del?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what's most interesting about it. They're all very endearing. They have a substantial shelf life, if you will, right? Where most medications that we provide in the Western world is, a daily use kind of deal. Even breakthroughs like ketamine, which I absolutely believe in and think is a very good resource. If you really dive into it, maybe you've got a couple weeks of sustainability on that. These studies, smoking cessation in particular, we're talking 6 months of relief and no cravings, things like that. There's nothing like that. There's the next best things that they have couldn't hold a candle to these numbers that we see on these sustainabilities and one-time use kind of plays.
Yeah, and I wonder, I'm not sure we'll ever know why they work the way they do, and I'm not sure we as humans really need to know that, right? But it's something we always want to know, right? And part of what makes me curious about this is, I have friends who are physicians, and there's some who are very open-minded, like probably some of the folks that you're working with, and one was talking to me the other night about, hey, one of the things that's most upsetting about the medical community is how nobody wants to talk about the placebo effect. Like it's deemed to be bad. And then when you're taught as a physician, as you're brought up, you're taught that the placebo effect is a negative thing, right? So, but the miracle of it all is the placebo effect is turning on the intention in our brains and in our bodies and our fields to allow us to heal. And there's no doubt about it that it works, right? It's seen forever. It's just, we always dismiss it. And I wonder if psilocybin and some of these things are helping folks open up that reality to that, to getting that their brain to rewire itself for them as an intentional effect, because they've reached the end of their rope. They've tried everything, and their intention is so strong at that moment to achieve those results that there's nothing that'll hold it back from working. And, is it something as simple as that, or is there actually physical things happening as well? Or maybe both. And does it really matter? I don't know, but it's an existential question that, I just wonder if you have any perspective on that, from all the work that you're doing and seeing all the, being close at the ground level here. Any perspective to share on how it's working?
Yeah, I definitely think it's both. I think that, I think of the nutritional benefits of
There's that too.
mushrooms as a whole, right? This is like a whole kingdom that we've just kind of glazed over. It's like if I were to take vegetables out of your diet and say, hey, you should eat broccoli because it's good for you. One, it doesn't taste that great, and I don't see results day one. Does that mean you shouldn't eat vegetables, or that, 3 months down the road, you might see health benefits because it's physically working? I think mushrooms can do that. We don't need enough psilocybin mushrooms. That's functional. We'll talk about that at a later date. But there's definitely studies showing about, neural pathways being regrown. So there is a physical aspect, a physiological aspect that happens with psilocybin. But man, we're talking about the human mind. The human mind, we are in our infancy of understanding the potential here. Joe Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo.
Oh, it's great.
I mean, read that,
That's fantastic.
It's the, I need to find a better way to say it, but basically, I mean, I don't give a shit if it's a placebo. If it's a placebo, give me 10 of them. I'll eat them all. It doesn't matter. It's if it works, I don't care. Now, the academic community in the Western world and, scientific America isn't going to deal with that. But why do we even give credit to miracles or even consider the word miracle if we're not ready to accept some of these are things that we just don't understand. We don't know. But what I will say, for instance, the Ayahuasca Foundation, Carlos Tanner is a friend of mine who runs the Ayahuasca Foundation, which is a group down in South America working with ayahuasca. They are finding that the very first experience you have always tends to be the most important. And I think what that is that you're coming from a completely naive mindset. You're very excited about whatever it is you're about to embark on. You're probably as intentional as you've ever been in your life, because when you enter into these very altered states that invoke, a lot of foreign and scary and joyful feelings, you're just open. You're just in a different spot. But to have your mind, ready to rock and roll and to receive healing, or you're thinking you're going down there to get healing, and then it shows up, it's self-fulfilling prophecy, to some degree. So I think it's both. I think physiologically, some of these, like ayahuasca for the gut health, and they use ayahuasca for as a purgatory. It's called La Purga, to vomit. And they purge a lot of bad spirits, probably bad bacteria, things of those nature. Like we're just so naive to the potential and possibility of these mind expanding medicines. It's hard to say exactly what's happening or what we're going to be able to even understand in our infancy. It's like asking an ant to read Shakespeare. It's just hard.
Well, maybe that's a great place for us to take a break. And I think, regardless of the fact, your point is well taken, right? It doesn't really matter. Like if it works, it works. And I know that's true, for folks that are struggling through some of these things. And it's been that way, with a lot of folks that I've met and experienced, and even with issues that I've faced in my own life, right? You get to the point where, you're ready to try something different. And when it works, you want to tell everybody about it. Right. And some people like Del want to actually go forward and be a leader and develop nonprofits that do research to prove it so that other people can learn. So Del, thank you so much for joining us and what you're doing with Unlimited Sciences. I'd love to talk to you again. I know you've also founded a functional mushroom company called Umbo. And, I want to talk to you about that as well. And so we'll schedule another time to get together if that's okay with you. And we'll go through that side of mushrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just leave it with the idea that I believe functional mushrooms, like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, I believe they have just as much, if not more, potential to help humanity in health issues as psilocybin, which is a pretty bold statement coming from someone who's dedicated their life towards trying to, or is dedicating my life towards trying to decriminalize these powerful substances. So lots to unveil there as well. So, but yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely, Del. Well, you have a great day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule.
You're welcome. We'll chat with you soon, Ashley. Thank you.
Take care, Del.
Hey guys, as always, this episode is brought to you by Packed with Life Tea. I always talk about how much I love iced tea, and Packed with Life tastes fantastic. And I don't add any sweetener or anything like that. Just great tasting iced tea packed with organic adaptogens, including the 4 key mushrooms: lion's mane, chaga, cordyceps, and reishi. Of course, it tastes great as hot tea as well, if that's your thing. And some people like to add a little bit of honey. But either way, no matter how you like your tea, you're going to love this tea, and it will boost your immune system, brain, lungs, and gut. That's why it's packed with life. So get yours today at packedwithlife.com. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Ashley on Nothing But the Truth for a Better You and Me.